I stumbled upon 8 terrifying Craigslist ads that led to unbelievable horrors. I never should have opened that door. The moment I did, an icy chill hit my skin like a slap. My heart raced. I was home, in my small studio, safe and sounder, so I thought it was an ordinary Thursday night. I scrolled through Craigslist, half-heartedly looking for new furniture to fill my empty space. That's when I saw an ad that stopped me cold. Looking for live models. No experience necessary. The description sent shivers down my spine. They sought models for unique artistic visions. It sounded artistic, almost enticing, but those words didn't feel right. I could hear the creaking of the floorboards under my feet, as if they too were warning me. Next up was an ad for child's room makeover. Only the room was eerily decorated with vintage dolls. I could almost hear their whispers, begging to be noticed. The shadows cast by the dim lamp flickered as if in agreement. I had a lump in my throat, the hairs on my arms standing on end. Then I stumbled upon an ad for free psychic readings. The photos showed an old woman surrounded by candles, her eyes hauntingly piercing. The fireplace crackled slightly as I pictured her murmuring dark secrets meant for desperate souls. The scent of something burnt filled the air, and my gut twisted. In the corner of the page was a dark ad, haunted house tours. They boasted genuine encounters with restless spirits. My pulse quickened. I imagined wandering through the shadows, feeling cold fingertips brushing against my neck. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the hallway behind me. I whirled around, my heart pounding like a drum. I was alone. Or was I? A flicker caught my eye as I returned to the screen. Help wanted. Undertaker's apprentice. The thought sent nausea swirling in my stomach. As the words "apply at your own risk" stared back, my fingers trembled over the keyboard. What risk? The last ad was the most disturbing. Find your missing loved one. It promised the return of those lost at a price. Darkness danced around me. I shivered. What was the price? I glanced around, the room feeling colder, shadows shifting. What was happening? My instincts screamed for me to leave, but curiosity bound me to that screen. Just then, the door behind me creaked open. I didn't let myself breathe. I slowly turned around. Hey! Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The door swung open with a rusty squeal that amplified the stillness of the room. I held my breath, certain that whatever lingered in the dark beyond the threshold was far more dangerous than anything I'd seen in those damn ads. Hello? I whispered, my voice swallowed by the oppressive silence. No response, just the heavy air pressing against me like a lead blanket. The darkness beyond the door appeared to thicken, swirling with a palpable energy. Gradually, I stepped closer, every nerve in my body screaming to retreat. The hallway stretched out like an abyss, shadows clawing at the edges of poorly lit walls. Then, I heard Ida's soft, giggle-like sound that seemed to ripple through the air. Panic consumed me. Was it real, or was it a trick of my mind? Just the wind, I muttered, my fingers tightening around my phone, now my only source of reassurance. I retreated slightly but felt an unfamiliar force nudging me forward. I glanced back at the screen, the chilling Craigslist ad still open, the possibilities of each dark text gnawing at my curiosity. The giggle came again, closer this time, a sharp sound that echoed off the walls, slicing through my composure. As if pulled by a string, I moved back toward the door, one reluctant step after another, until I finally crossed the threshold. The hallway was pitch black, the faintest outline of the opposite wall merely a suggestion. I fumbled for a light switch but found nothing. Instead, I fished my phone from my pocket, the screen lighting up my path. The glow was fleeting, flickering as if battling against an unseen force. As I ventured forward, the walls seemed to shift, pressing in on me. An oppressive sensation of age accompanied the damp air, something older than time itself. My phone illuminated what looked like a faded painting hanging to my left, a family portrait with grotesque facial distortions that twisted the once cheerful expressions into a sinister parody. Their eyes seemed to follow me, an indictment of my very presence in this haunted corridor. Then, a sudden whisper broke the heavy air, an echo of my own name, soft, almost pleading. Help! It spread like wildfire through the back of my mind, a scream bottled up that begged to be known. I froze, dread knotting my stomach. Turning away from the painting, I stumbled back, nearly colliding with the wall. My heart raced, the thudding echoed too loudly in my ears, the voice pulling at something deep within me. Help! Without warning, the fluorescent light in my phone flickered and died, plunging me into darkness, the silence roaring in my ears. My pulse thundered, an insistent reminder that I was far from safe. I took a deep breath but was met with a pungent, rotten odor that clawed at my throat. Did I end that nauseating stillness? I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps, deliberate and steady, drawing closer. I turned, my heart pounding harder as the cool air prickled against my skin. My mind raced back to the ads, the dangers that awaited models and the promises they held. As I strained to listen, the steps stopped abruptly. But that was not the only thing that shifted in the silence. I felt another presence, something right beside me. Suddenly, my phone vibrated violently in my hand, slinging me back to reality. I glanced down. There was a new notification flashing ominously on the lock screen. It read, "Your missing loved one has been found. Proceed to claim them." An icy chill crept down my spine. I didn't know how this was happening, but I felt a connection to something dark. Just then, a hand, small and clammy, reached out from the shadows. Before I could react, the darkness erupted with a lightning flash, blinding me momentarily. As my vision cleared, I blinked in disbelief at the figure standing before me, a child, eerily familiar yet undeniably wrong. The light flickered again, illuminating its face twisted in tragic joy. "Daddy, I've been waiting." An unbearable weight crushed my chest as memories crashed like waves. A burning desire to understand eclipsing every ounce of fear. And then, a chilling realization cut deeper than any terror. I never opened the door to that hallway. Before I could process the depth of that thought, the ground beneath me began to tremble, the air thickening with a manic energy, and behind me, the door slammed shut with a reverberating bang. The child smiled wider, a grin of infinite darkness, as shadows began to swirl around us. The temperature plummeted as the swirling shadows coalesced, cocooning us in a darkness that breathed, as if alive. I wanted to scream, to lash out in terror, but the sight of the child held me captive. The light flickered again, casting brief illuminating bursts that flashed over the walls. They were adorned with harrowing images, scenes from a nightmare, depicting dire horrors that sent chills through my very core. "Daddy," it cooed, its voice echoing eerily, reverberating off the walls that seemed to crawl closer. Each whispered syllable twisted like knife edges. Renegade memories surged through my mind, a tiny hand slipping out of mine at the park, laughter being swallowed by chaos, a moment that had shattered and left me bereft. The realization that gripped me was stifling. The sensations were overwhelming, burning with a desperate longing that made it hard to breathe. I stumbled back, disoriented, my flashlight flickering, unsure whether to regard this apparition with joy or horror. "Help me," it repeated, the words slipping from its lips like a dark incantation, as if the very act of asking for help translated into a deeper, more sinister plea. The shadows pressed tighter, twisting around the child, who now looked less like the pure form of innocence and more like a creature of malice and despair. Every drop of warmth faded from my skin as a sinister laugh erupted from the ether, a cacophony of unhinged joy that swirled like vapor around us. Within the laughter, I heard whispered secrets, unearthly echoes of anguish that felt familiar yet foreign, resonating with the darkness that enveloped us. Within that cacophony, unmistakably, was my wife's voice, pleading, begging for release. No, I gasped, grappling with the growing dread that came with every heartbeat. This isn't real. This can't be happening, yet the child continued to smile, a haunting semblance of joy contorted in the throes of malevolence. Mama is waiting too. She misses you. The words struck me like a blade, fraying the edges of reality as I fought against a deluge of memories clawing to the surface, memories that I thought I had buried deep within me. The walls began to pulse, and the darkness itself shifted, as if responding to the emotions cascading through me. Faces flashed in the shadows, those I had lost, their hollow eyes pleading from centuries of despair. I could feel their grief slither around my ankles, pulling me under. Claim us, the child begged, its voice tinged with anguish, forcing my heart to ache. You have to set us free. The shadows thickened, wrapping around me like a shroud. Panic coursed through my veins, and I twisted away, trying to escape, but found no way out. I was brutally aware of the electrical hum that surged through the air, charged with an unholy energy that whispered dark promises. Suddenly, the room trembled as the ground contorted beneath my feet, and I caught a glimpse of the walls inching closer, choking the already narrow space. I looked back at the child, whose features were starting to dissolve, transforming into something grotesque and unrecognizable. In that moment of clarity amidst chaos, I understood the room wasn't sideways. I was. The very fabric of reality was unraveling, tethered to the shadows that bled into my existence. The darkness wound itself tighter around me, siphoning hope and light, just as the notifications on my phone buzzed with increasing urgency. There's a doorway, the child rasped, its voice now laced with desperation. You have to find the opening. It's the only way. Before I could respond, it shattered into a blaze of shadow, elongating into a wave of darkness that surged toward me and stopped, leaving behind an echo of frantic laughter. As the last remnants of the apparition faded, a portal opened on my left, a gaping maw rippling with an unnatural glow. Quasitons spiraled through my mind. Was this truly a way out, or yet another snare? But as the shadows reached for me, I knew I had no choice. With a heart full of trepidation, I dove straight into the enigma before me. The moment I crossed the threshold, the world exploded into chaos. I tumbled through a tunnel of writhing darkness, the whispers rising to a thunderous roar that clawed at my sanity, threatening to devour any vestige of hope I clung to. I could hear the taunts, the scoffs of the unseen, the warnings of the entities I had unwittingly invited into my soul. And then, like thunder crashing in a storm, a voice rang out louder than the rest. You shouldn't have opened that door. As the echoes of laughter echoed behind me, I fell into something cold and wet. Instinctively, I kicked for the surface, my lungs burning, but instead of air, I clawed at viscous darkness that pulled me deeper. Just when I thought my strength would fail, I felt something solid beneath me, a body, lifeless and cold, entangled in murky shadows. Before I could process what it meant, the presence of countless faces formed in the gloom around me, eyes wide open, mouths moving, but no sound escaping. They were reaching for me, their hands desperate, as the ground gave way beneath me. And then the final warning sliced through the air. Help us. The weight of the world pressed down as I fell deeper into the abyss, the shadows whispering cruel promises of despair and dread. And then, everything went dark once more. The darkness enveloped me, cold and suffocating, promising to consume every scrap of warmth still clinging to my body. Panic fused with an icy realization I was not alone. The lifeless body beneath me became a catalyst for horror, its skin clammy, matted hair entwined with wretched tendrils of shadow. I recoiled, prying away from the morbid connection, but the whispers of the tormented souls tightened their grip around my limbs, pulling me deeper into their realm. Join us, they pleaded, their voices a dissonant chorus carrying a sorrowful melody that tugged at the frayed edges of my sanity. You can save us, but you must be willing to pay the price. The entanglement tightened, and I flailed, heart racing as the chorus crescendoed. Faces emerged from the abyss, children, adults, old souls with hollow eyes that wore the burden of despair I had never dreamed possible. Each mouth opened and closed in a distorted dance, clamoring for attention, their faces cycling through fear, hope, and what I could only call madness. Listen. You must listen. One voice pierced through the chaos, distinct from the rest. It was small yet commanding, an eerie mix of familiarity and a chill that coursed down my spine. The face that formed from the shadows was a pale reflection of the child I'd seen before, but now it wore the expression of anguish, as if trapped in a cycle of eternal begging. Help us find the light. We can't escape without you. The pit where I lay shifted beneath me, each movement sending shockwaves of dread through my bones, and suddenly I knew. I could not simply help them. I was being chosen as a sacrificial means to open doors I never intended to touch again. Oh, I gasped, the word a plea that reverberated out into the ether, but the shadows didn't falter. Instead, they pressed closer, sealing any exit I might have envisioned. I could feel their cold breath against my skin, a noxious wind that seeped despair into my soul. Do not resist, the child's voice said softly, a harmony layered within the chaos that sent shivers through me. Embrace your sorrow. We can be whole again, but you will have to surrender. I tried to scream, but the sound was swallowed by the overwhelming weight of memories that began to surface, unbidden. Images flashed before my eyes. My wife's empty gaze, the last breath of my child as they slipped from my grasp, the haunting episodes replayed in a cycle I could not escape. Each moment bled into the next, drawing me deeper into the vortex of darkness that clung to me like a shroud. Release what you hold, the voices cried, and I felt so many hands grasping at my heart, synchronized in their desperate bid for deliverance. You have the power. Set us free. As the shadows pulsed around me, a feeling of warmth flickered within, igniting flames of dread mingled with compassion. In that split second, I felt the weight of their sorrow, a collective grief that wrapped around my soul, binding me with strings spun from loss and regret. But it came with a price. The moment of lucidity left me agonized, torn between saving them and saving myself. I couldn't decide. My body trembled, caught in the ancient dance of despair, entwined with their longing. Yet, in the stillness, the darkness shifted again, forming shapes and figures that mirrored my past echoes of my family, hardened expressions twisting into something darker. Join us, they wailed, the chant swelling in a way that threatened to shatter my resolve. A singular thought pierced through the cacophony. If I gave in, what would that mean for my soul? In that moment of heart-wrenching indecision, I felt my fingers slipping from a ghostly grip. I was being pulled back, away from the abyss, away from their cries, into the light that barely flickered at the edges of the scrolling void. Perhaps it was a way out, perhaps it was false hope. Suddenly, from the heart of the darkness, a figure emerged, a grotesque paragon of both despair and rage, towering over me, merging with the shadows. It wore the face of the unimaginable, a monstrous blend of the lost souls it represented. You think you understand pain, but we are the ones who know it truly. It bellowed, the sound reverberating through the darkness like thunder. With each word it spoke, a wave of anguish crashed over me, your torment feeding its power. You cannot escape, and you will never leave this place unless you embrace what it means to carry us with you. As a final surge of darkness spiraled around me, drowning out all hope, I caught a glimpse of the child's face dissolving into shadows, yet its eyes burned with fierce longing, both pleading and promising. I knew either I would fall into their abyss, or they would follow me. Forever entangled at I end that moment of sheer horror. An earth-shattering crack echoed through the void, and the very ground beneath me trembled violently, threatening to split open. Something was coming, something ancient and terrifying, rising from the depths of despair I couldn't outrun, a harbinger of a choice I was not ready to face. Prepare yourself, the darkness whispered. It will be your reckoning. And, just like that, the ground beneath me erupted, plunging into an unfathomable chasm, pulling me into the belly of the nightmare I had unwittingly awakened. As I tumbled into the rift, every instinct screamed for me to fight against the intangible hands that grasped at me, pulling me down into the darkness maw. The air vibrated with a guttural wail that melded with the shrieks of the souls I had sought to help, an otherworldly symphony that clawed at my sanity. They were losing hope, and somehow, I knew this was the moment their fate entwined with mine. Flashes of my past broke through the abyss, the warmth of sunlight filtering through trees during a summer picnic, the gentle laughter of my children echoing in the empty hallways of our home. Those memories were shattered like fragile glass as the darkness engulfed me, twisting them into something grotesque. I felt their laughter turn into cackles, their smiles morphing into twisted grimaces of despair as I descended deeper. Reality warped around me. Bizarre landscapes unfolded. I saw memories morphing into hellish remnants, our picnic blanket, now a grotesque patchwork of decaying flesh and blood-soaked fabric. The trees transformed into skeletal arms, reaching for me in mockery. I blinked, disbelief thunderstruck by the raw, pulsating fear that surged in my chest. Was this hell? Had my soul been cast into the depths of madness? A voice slipped through the chaos, familiar, yet distorted. It was my wife, her tone soaked with sorrow and betrayal. "You left us," she spat, her face flickering like the embers of a dying fire. "Now you'll understand what it means to suffer. You walked away. You turned your back when I needed you most. You chose them over us." The accusation struck me like a physical blow, sending me crashing against the jagged edges of my memories. "No," I yelled, my voice drowned in the echo of her pain. I gripped the fabric of my mind, fighting against the overwhelming tide threatening to pull me under. "I never meant to abandon. Your intentions are meaningless here," she roared, her form shifting into a monstrous version of itself, twisted with anguish and a haunting specter born from my deepest regrets. A sudden tremor quaked the ground, and the rift around me buckled, rearranging itself into a confounding labyrinth of despair. There was a faint glimmer in the distance. Was it light? I clawed my way toward it, driven by an instinctual need to escape. Yet the further I propelled myself, the louder the whispers grew, intensifying into a thunderous roar. "Join us. Embrace the suffering," they cried, their harmonies binding around my throat, choking me. I could feel their cold fingers dragging me back toward them. Shadows emerged from walls of writhing forms, each echo reflecting my heartbeats as I struggled with one thought: salvation or doom? As I neared the flickering light, its warmth spiraled around me, sewing together the fabric of reality. Then, in the tenuous grasp of hope, something terrifying happened. From within the light, figures emerged, but they were neither human nor specters. They were faceless shadows, their bodies contorted and mangled, dragging their essence through the haze of despair. "Help us," they rasped, their voices intermingling with those of the tormented souls still clinging to the past. "We're lost, and you're our only chance. Surrender and you'll set us free." But the more they beckoned, the clearer it became I was part of this terrible cycle. The flickering light dimmed as I stumbled back, collapsing between the eternal conflict of the light and the dark. I was caught, ensnared in the jaws of their twisted game, batting against the realization that I had not come here to save them. I was here as the price paid for my failures. As I wrestled with the implications of my presence, I caught sight of something moving. The ground shifted violently beneath me once more. Beneath the soft illumination, a grotesque creature slithered towards me, its many eyes glistening with an insatiable hunger. With each movement, it grinned wider, revealing rows upon rows of serrated teeth that dripped with the ichor of lost memories. "You've kept them waiting too long," it hissed, its voice a blend of despair and delight, echoing the words I had once uttered to my family when I chose to leave. Before I could scream, darkness flooded my senses as the grotesque beast lunged. I felt its breath, hot and rancid, lingering at the edge of my thoughts as its multitude of hands grasped at my chest, feeling for the sorrow at the core of my being, the sacrifice it desired. And in that moment, as terror paralyzed me, the rift cracked once more, splitting as the hallway of shadows erupted into chaos. My screams mingled with the primal roar of the beast, the shadowed souls howling in desperate harmony, and I was left teetering on the edge of oblivion. Then, impossibly, the ground shuddered beneath me, and the creature jerked back, snapping its head toward the rising wave of noise. The dark shadows erupted into a frenzy, spilling out of the rift like flocks of black birds fleeing from an unseen predator. A deafening cacophony filled the air, overshadowing the demands of the souls and the growl of the creature. I stood frozen, barely breathing, struck by a revelation that ignited the very essence of my being. Something far worse than the darkness was approaching, marking the end of my escape attempts and the beginning of something much greater. A blinding light burst forth from the depths of the abyss as fragments of reality shattered against a new threat. Something unimaginable. Something that both terrified and intrigued. I could feel it draw closer, the very air thickening as the temperature plunged, enveloping me in an unfathomable dread that chilled my soul. Your choice has come, the voices warned, melting seamlessly into the chaos. And then I saw Ida's ghastly silhouette emerging from the depths, silhouetted against the light as it approached, scattering the shadows around me like feathers in the wind. Prepare yourself, the chorus of lost souls whispered through the tension. For once it comes for you, there will be no turning back. I braced for what was to come, the darkness pressing against my spine. But before I could comprehend any further, the silhouette lunged into the blinding light, and a deafening silence fell over the scene. What arrived next would change everything. A truth, a revelation, a terror that would end my story or subject me to an eternity of torment. And I was caught in the eye of the storm, holding my breath as the very fabric of life blurred into the impending horror waiting just beyond the threshold. I should have kept walking. The urge to glance back at the rift, now pulsating and undulating behind me, tugged at my instincts. As much as I wanted to escape this nightmare, I was acutely aware of the sinister energies that pulsated around me like a heartbeat, reminding me of my failures. The light that had momentarily filled the void receded, revealing an unsettling corridor draped in shadows no longer confined to the rift. This new space twisted and contorted, reminiscent of a hellish funhouse, walls bending inwards, their surfaces slick and alive, as though breath radiated from the very fabric of the room. Otherworldly whispers slithered through the air, threading themselves into my psyche, each syllable a tantalizing promise of knowledge that would uncover my unity with their suffering. Join us, why resist your fate? Echoed the shadows. I could sense the longing in their pleas, a desperate craving for understanding forged through shared agony. A flicker of movement caught my eye, but it was not the silvery wraith I expected. In the corner of the room, beneath an erratic flickering bulb, something more horrid emerged, an advertisement pinned to the wall, its edges rippling like flesh. I approached cautiously, my breath shallow and quickened, dread creeping over my skin as I read the words scrawled across the poster in a frantic hand. Need help? Seeking souls to complete a task essential experience. Life-changing rewards. Marriages broken. Grief endured. Awaiting your call. My heart raced as I read it over and over, each word wrapping around my throat like a noose. This was more than a simple plea for help. This was a lure, aimed at those like Melos souls yearning for salvation or perhaps a chance to undo the irrevocable. Behind the words sat a sinister promise, one that resonated with my deepest regrets. Acceptance. Without thinking, I tore the ad from the wall, felt both comforting and vile in my hands. And just like that, it began to pulse, burning warmth against my palm. A connection formed with the darkness I was trying so desperately to escape. Suddenly, a low, guttural howling echoed through the corridor, reverberating off the warped walls. It was a sound filled with rage-hunger. The creature from the rift was lingering, watching, waiting. The thought quickened my pulse, yet an inexplicable mixture of curiosity and horror urged me to stay. As I turned away from the ad, the shadows shifted, coiling around my legs. Faces formed in the darkness, mournful, anguished, and filled with a longing that echoed through the depths of my mind. They leaned closer, revealing the intimacy of their despair, manifesting as memories, moments I never fully lived, regrets that coursed through my veins like poison. Take it, they whispered, voices a distorted lullaby. Embrace the task the others have before. You can find your family, your peace. With the guttural howl intensifying in the distance, I clutched the advertisement, feeling the weight of its promises sink into my bones. The walls trembled as if anticipating my reaction. Just as I contemplated the next move, the air shifted, permeated by a sickening warmth. The corridor twisted violently, a vortex churning in the center, and suddenly the faces began to merge into one-me wife's face. Her eyes, devoid of light, bore straight into mine, and as she reached for me, the shadows peeled back the layers of darkness to unveil a series of doors behind her. Choose. She shrieked, her voice a raw blade against the encroaching madness. One door will bring you back, haunt you softly, while the other, her laughter twisted with desperation, will give you what you seek, but at a cost you cannot comprehend. The doors shifted, open. A cacophony of wails surged from within. I stood paralyzed, overtaken by the realization that I had become the pivot in a game far more extensive than my own suffering. The advertisement flickered in my grip, almost vibrating with impatience. Without warning, the ground began to quake violently, and abruptly, the creature from the rift bolted into view, its countless eyes glinting with hunger and anger, its maw stretching beyond comprehension, spewing forth a gale of fury. The time approaches. It roared, the air around us thickening, and as I teetered at the precipice of my decision, the wails from the doors crescendoed, twisting into somber songs of loss, and I dropped the ad. It thudded against the ground, and for a moment, silence enveloped the scene. A momentarily calm enveloped me, as I locked eyes with the entity before me. Choose quickly, it hissed, the walls trembling around us. What lay behind those doors might offer redemption or further plunge me into despair. And just like that, everything shifted. The doors behind me swung wide open. I was struck by the chaotic swirl of colors as the haunting memories spilled forth in waves, attempting to ensnare me, begging for my return into the shadows. That I knew I had to Chusito break the cycle or succumb to the invading horror now clawing through the rift. But as I felt the hissing breath of the creature at my back, a deafening silence heralded a moment of reckoning. Then, the booming voice of the abyss broke through the chaos. What you choose now will reverberate through eternity. And as the darkness surged, I realized time itself was slipping away, leaving me dangling at the edge of the unknown, breathless and alone. As reality erupted around me in waves of grief and guilt, the choice was no longer mine to make. The very ground beneath me opened, and the maw of shadows beckoned me forward, demanding my decision as the looming presence of terror promised to consume me whole. The shadows danced violently around me, slipping through the cracks of reality, grasping at my limbs with desperate, clawing fingers. I felt their chill seeping into my skin, wrapping around my heart, squeezing tighter with each pulse of the rift behind me. Adrenaline surged through me, drowning out the whispers of the faces that had merged into the specter of my wife, her visage distorted by layers of grief and longing. The creature loomed closer, its ice infinitesimal void shrouded in hungry malice, revealing more than their quarry. Your time is running thin, it snarled, venom dribbling from an unfathomable maw as it recoiled, readying to charge. The howling chorus erupted again, a mournful crescendo that clawed at the edges of my sanity. One final, anguished plea echoed through me, compelling and terrifying. Choose. The doors loomed on either side, silhouettes of doubt and hope, shimmering with the torment of countless souls, my lives potential flashing through the darkness like a strobe. I staggered towards my wife's face, now an unrecognizable mask of sorrow. There was something familiar there, behind the anguish, something that tugged at the lost pieces of my heart. Choose me. She wailed again, the walls trembling as if riveted to her agony. I felt my resolve crack as anxiety ratcheted up. The creature's breath hung heavily in the air, rancid and palpable, but the other door, a looming shadow filled with the promise of secrets I ached to uncover, caught my eye. My breath caught as a memory surfaced, flickerings of laughter and warmth, a time when the world hadn't been encased in sorrow. What might wait behind that darkness? What could I reclaim or destroy? As I teetered on the brink, heartsick and overwhelmed, the ad I had discarded pulsated again, hot against the cool floor, beckoning me to heed its promises of resolution. Confusion churned in my gut as I battled the ever-increasing pressure of the creature's presence. Like the tide closing in without conscious thought, I lurched to the left, driven by instinct and raw fear, and reached for the door that held my wife's face. But just as my fingers grazed the cold handle, a bone-chilling howl erupted from the rift, an insidious, wrathful cry that sliced through the din, altering the very air around me. I spun around, and the creature's form twisted violently, its many eyes narrowing, focusing on me with a blinkless intensity. Foolishness invites despair. It roared, and as I stood frozen, transfixed by its overwhelming gaze, the walls around us began to warp. The corridor morphed, elongating grotesquely, tugging at my sanity while its whispers surged with venomous delight. Time is an illusion here. The shadows coiled around my ankles, distracting me, clouding my senses, urging me to surrender to the black abyss of despair. Stay with us, you don't need to choose a door. You belong here. I won't, I cried back, lurching towards the door again, the flickering form of my wife transforming with each desperate step. She no longer looked like the woman I loved but a grotesque parody, her features twisting in a hand of agony, contorted by the weight of my sins. Your choice is misleading, come back. Her voice chimed sweetly, a counterpoint to the creature's raw fury as I lay my palm against the door, ready to yield. The fabric of reality around us shredded with an explosive sound, and the corridor imploded, folding in on itself. I felt myself being pulled, the walls gravitating together like vengeful hands reaching for my soul. I screamed, half expecting the floor to drop away beneath me. Just as my heart raced toward its last beat, everything trembled into chaos. The scream peeled back the darkness, revealing glimpses of past lives, blurring memories of choices long made, overshadowed by the rising pulse of a deeper, more primal fear, the absolute end of everything I had lived for. Then, without warning, the ground erupted into a churning whirlpool of shadows, a gaping maw ripping through existence. I was losing grip. Whatever trajectory I aimed for vanished beneath the overwhelming tide of the void. Suddenly, the howling chorus transformed into one resonant scream, and at the core of it lay my own name, tangled in the intricate play of despair that bound us all within this nightmare. With no other option, I flung myself toward the maw of the abyss, fully aware that choice was no longer a privilege I possessed. But as I felt my body break through the threshold and vanish into the consuming darkness, a familiar hand clasped my wrist, pulling me back with excruciating force. The last thing I saw before descending into the black was the creature's eyes expanding with hung air of victory rendered, and the last whispers of a warning lost in the consuming void. I awoke on the cold, hard ground, gasping for breath, the stench of decay clinging to the air like a shroud. My heart hammered in my chest, echoing against the dark, lifeless void around me. The echoes of the howling chorus still whispered at the edges of my consciousness, a lingering reminder of the terror I had barely escaped. With shaking limbs, I pushed myself up. The world around me was no longer the corridor of torment but a desolate expanse, drowning in an oppressive twilight. Shadows loomed and twisted, seemingly alive, reaching toward me with clawed fingers. I felt an instinctive dread coil in my gut as I scanned the horizon, searching for the door or a trace of the grotesque creature that had held me captive. Where am I? My voice cracked, swallowed by the weight of despair that hung heavier than the thick air surrounding me. Fragments of my memories seemed to slip away like phantoms teasing at the edges of reality. I staggered to my feet, a sudden clarity cutting through the haze of confusion. That handsome one had pulled me back. But who? As I stumbled forward, shadows danced at the corners of my vision, flickering like static on a broken screen. The ground beneath my feet became uneven, forming a slick, serpentine path that slithered into the gloom. I hesitated, the primal urge to flee tearing at my spine. But there was something deeply compelling, a flicker of familiarity that tugged at me from the distance. A faint glow emerged, emanating from a structure obscured by the creeping fog. With each step, the shadows seemed to pulse around me, whispering secrets that chilled my blood. They called my name, trailing ghostly fingers along my skin. Turn back. You mustn't go further. I shook my head, forcing myself onward. The light grew, manifesting as a flickering sign hanging crookedly from a wooden frame. Cthulhu's basement for the experiences that will change your life, it proclaimed, the neon colors dripping like leaky paint. A knot twisted in my chest as I approached, the name sounding memories that thought I'd buried deep enough to forget. The door creaked open before I even laid a finger on it, revealing a dim room filled with uncomfortable silence, the air thick with an unnameable tension that clung to my bones. Inside, rows of dilapidated chairs faced a small stage draped in cracked velvet, where reality itself seemed to flutter like the last remnants of a long-dead dream. And then I saw Ida frayed cardboard box sitting on the edge of the stage, a swarm of shadows gathering hungrily around its base. My heartbeat quickened. This box, it felt monumental, its presence looming with untold possibilities. But what horrors lay within? The shadows began to whisper incessantly, a cacophony of voices blending, a chorus of anguish begging for release. They washed over me, throwing me into a swirl of memories, flashes of laughter, intertwining with despair. The faces I had lost merging into a single consciousness, all pleading for recognition. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, stepping into the dim light, a woman with sunken eyes and a face ID once known, but now wore the mask of grief's torment. "You're here," she rasped, her voice like a blade slicing through the suffocating air. "You found the ads?" Then I blinked, recognition slicing through the chaos. "No," I stammered, stepping back as the haunting memories surged again. I had wronged her, betrayed her faith, and here she was, tied deeply into this nightmare. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Meaning is irrelevant. It's too late," she hissed, taking a step closer, shadows curling enticingly around her form, blurring the line between humanity and the darkness. "You opened the door, and now you must face what it brings." Before I could respond, the box on the stage burst open, a plume of thick, dark smoke billowing outward with a sickening crackle, rippling through the air like the call of something ancient and primal. A low, palpable growl echoed from within, punctuated by the shrieks of tortured souls rising in a chorus of pure agony. Panic surged through me as I stumbled back, tripping over a chair and crashing to the ground. I fought to crawl away, but the shadows tightened their grip, coiling around my legs, refusing to let me escape. A figure emerged from the smoky, a howling entity stitched from nightmares, its countless eyes turning toward me with malicious delight. That I screamed, but the sound dissolved into oblivion, swallowed by the roar of the growing entity. As the shuddering mass inched closer, I felt the ground tremble beneath me, a vibration that whispered of horrors yet to come. "You brought us here. You belong to us now," the shadows chanted, their voices entwining with that of the creature. A reminder of my fears and regrets. With every ounce of strength, I yanked my legs free, launching myself toward the back of the room. I needed to find a way out, but the walls pressed closer together as the creature advanced, its breath fetid and rancid, laced with the cries of people it had consumed, mingling with my own growing dread. And as I reached for the crashing door, that familiar hand was suddenly around my wrist again, pulling me backward into the suffocating darkness once more, drawing me into the massive shadows. That a flash of white-hot pain erupted through my arm as I turned to snatch that hand free, but instead, I found Hera visage that twisted those final fragments of who I thought I was, and the last thing I heard was her broken whisper before the light extinguished completely. "Choose again." The air warped, thick and suffocating, as shadows twisted in tandem with my rapidly fading resolve. Screams echoed through the depths of that consuming darkness, yet I could not pinpoint their origin. It was a symphony of anguish, pulsating like a festering wound, rising from the terrifying mass that loomed before me. The figure, stitched together from nightmares, seemed to shimmer as if the very fabric of reality would unravel if I dared to breathe too deeply. "Choose again," she had said, her voice trailing off like smoke. It was a command tinged with desperation. But choose what? I felt a sliver of dreadful clarity strike me. Within that frayed box lay a choice I could not fathom. The shadows pulsed as if urging me closer, seducing me with promises of power or perhaps salvation. Each thrum echoed the rhythm of my own thundering heart, a sinister counterpoint luring me deeper into its embrace. My instincts screamed for flight. Couldn't stay here. Casting one last glance at the woman, her eyes hollow yet pleading, I tore myself away, lunging toward the door that appeared as a mere illusion. The shadows slithered eagerly around my ankles, gripping me with icy tendrils that threatened to siphon away every breath, every spark of my humanity. Just as my fingers grazed the doorknob, a cacophony erupted behind me. The creature howled a chilling sound that resonated with every fiber of my being. I turned to face my harbinger, feeling my soul clench in terror as I witnessed its unnatural form expanding, pulling from the very walls of the room, feeding on my fear, my hesitation. Don't you want to know what lies within? The shadows taunted, doubt worming its way into my mind. I felt a whisper of something, an inscrutable urge tingling just beneath my skin, a yearning to confront whatever nightmare awaited. I shot back, my voice cracking, rallying against the tide of horror that surged toward me. I pushed the door, straining against the barrier as it creaked in protest. My instincts shouted to escape, but then I hesitated, uncertainty gripping me tightly. Should I confront this abomination, or run for my life? Face what you've wrought. The woman's voice rang sharp through the chaos, driving me to look back at the creature. It had steadied, stirring the shadows with a sinister glee, its multitude of eyes now locking onto me, reflecting my every fear back. Paralyzing visions of hopelessness unfurled like hellish banners in my mind. What have you done? I howled, the words feeling futile in the yawning chasm of darkness that surrounded me. But the creature's grin widened, revealing rows upon rows of jagged teeth that glistened, hints of blood marring the twitching smile. Then, like an ancient clock winding down, time stretched and twisted. Each second felt agonizingly slow as the shadows beckoned. A haunting echo from the past slithered into my awareness, whispering secrets of betrayal and blame, hints of choices that spiraled far from my control. Embrace your own shadows, it whispered, and I felt the surrounding atmosphere thrum with anticipation. A sinister invitation that dared me to step into the dark and reshape my destiny. Driven by fear and fury, I hurled open the door, stepping into the unknown just as the creature lunged. The air shifted, a tidal wave of energy crashing into me, yanking me into another realm, the beyond. A swirling void of nothingness that threatened to swallow me whole. I landed roughly on uneven ground, a sharp pain blooming through my knee as I blinked against a stark light. My surroundings shifted rapidly, brutal flashes of color and sound overwhelming my senses until they coalesced into a chaotic carnival scene that felt achingly familiar. And standing amidst the frenzy were people hollow-eyed, lost souls who had traversed this grotesque plane before me. They moved mechanically, each one locked in their own tormented dance, reeling under the weight of their own despair. Join us, a voice called out. A man, drawn with tempestuous shadows at his heels, extended a hand toward me, inviting yet grotesque. The horrors are meant to be embraced, to be shared. Stay away. I don't belong here, I yelled, but with each protest, another figure joined him, their faces twisting in tortured ecstasy. They beckoned, pulling at the frayed edges of my sanity. A siren's wail drowning reason. Choose again. The woman's voice echoed suddenly, reverberating in my mind like an inescapable chant, and I grasped for clarity. Reality and illusions are woven together. Maybe there was power in the choice I needed to face. Choose me. I chose you, the man urged, every syllable dripping with a lingering darkness that beckoned to my hidden desires. But before I could make my own decision, a thunderous crack surged through the air, silencing the carnival throng. A rift opened behind the figures, a swirling maw pulling them in, their screams swallowed whole wherever that led. I could feel the pull of its otherworldly power. Just as I contemplated my next move, the carnival shifted, the figures dissolving into a thick fog, and I felt suffocated. The door I had just emerged from flickered back into existence behind me, closing off my means of retreat. Choose again. The shadows wailed, and the thunder grew louder, crashing against my consciousness. And it was then, within that moment of desperation, that I saw my reflection in the shimmer of a nearby mirror, reflection so alien, yet achingly familiar. The face that stared back at me was twisted by a maniacal grin, eyes alight with an insatiable hunger for chaos and despair. Everything within me screamed to run, to break free, but the carnival beckoned, the shadows drew nearer, and the echoes of the past morphed with the promise of undeniable power. I took a trembling step forward, the air thick with anticipation, and whispered aloud to no one in particular, "What if I choose to stay?" At that very instant, as the shadows seemed to plunge into an ecstatic frenzy, the rift behind me wrenched open further, unleashing an unholy torrent of laughter. In that harrowing moment, I knew the choice I had just made would lead me down an unfathomable path with no return, and the final realization gripped me with icy fingers. The carnival was only the beginning, and then everything faded to black. It started with a bray of the gasp that traveled through the corridors of a mind straining against the weight of despair. I blinked, finding myself once again on the brink of that grotesque carnival, the remnants of laughter still echoing like distant thunder, mingling with the panicked breaths of the souls I had encountered. But now everything felt different. A deceptive calm hung in the air, thick and suffocating. As if all the screams had been replaced by a deceptive silence, I moved forward, driven by an inexplicable force that pushed and pulled, guiding me deeper into the shimmering haze that held me captive. The figures from before, lost souls entwined in eternal torments, were gone, yet their essence lingered, weaving through the air like dark smoke coiling around an unlit flame. Shadows danced along the warped perimeter of this hellish carnival, an enticing spectacle of grotesquerie that whispered promises I struggled to resist. But it was then that I understood. I had crossed a threshold, and every choice made had a consequence, shackling me to this incessant cycle of torment. Each step forward felt like I was inching toward a future steeped in suffering. I could feel the ground beneath me shift, trembling with anticipation, as if even the very fabric of this place crackled with a new energy. Choose again, the words wrapped around my very being, reverberating in a sinister chant, beckoning me to decide once more. I was trapped within an unending loop, a charade disguised as freedom. Before me, the enticing glow of the carnival transformed into a mirage, fading into the fog, only to re-emerge in familiar horror. The echoes of my family haunted every corner, distorted faces trapped behind the walls of this eternal jest, their eyes filled with grief, no betrayal. I shuddered under their watchful gaze. They held the weight of guilt that sliced deeper than any blade ever could. Step closer, a voice hissed, drawing me near to the heart of the carnival, where I sensed the pulsing rhythm of despair, a dark drumming that called to me, promising power over the jagged throes of heartbreak if I accepted it. With each hesitating step, a desperate surge of hope bubbled anew, a false salvation, one I could almost reach out and seize. All you need to do is embrace your grief, breathe life into it, the voice urged, seductive and smooth. I knew the path. I had been here before, yet curiosity gnawed at the edges of my resolve, pulling me closer to the unfolding darkness. A stage materialized in the chaos, adorned with worn curtains that fluttered restlessly, and at its foot lay a familiar shadow, the unused cardboard box, still pulsing with a sentience that chilled my bones. My heart raced wildly as I fought against the impulse to reach out, the wayward memories running rampant in my mind, the promises, the choices, the confessions. What awaits inside? I could hardly voice the question, yet it hung thickly in the air, almost demanding an answer. The ground trembled again, and the fog grew thick, coiling around my legs with whispers echoing from the walls, a cacophony of despair mixing with fervent hope. Choose who you want to be, the shadow figure urged as it stepped for the grotesque twist of every sense, embodying everything I had lost and surrendered. Your family aches. They miss you. Liberate them. Set them free. All at your fingertips. It extended a hand, distorted but oh so familiar, further enticing me to step deeper into the realm I had fought to escape only minutes ago. Struggling against the waves of wanting, I hesitated. But what's the cost? The words slipped out before I could catch them, spilling from my lips like molten sorrow. It requires acceptance, the shadow crooned, its voice a distorted reflection of memories broken by grief. Liberation demands sacrifice. You will be needed to rekindle their light while encapsulating your own darkness. What awaits you within will shatter the cycler, solidify it. The smile that spread across its features was a chorus of mockery against my pain. Something so inviting yet dreadfully wrong. So I gained them back at a price? I steeled myself, heart pounding in my chest. If I opened it, what atrocities might emerge? And yet, what if the very act of choosing to reclaim them was the only way to retrieve my own soul? An insidious rush of desire coursed through me, and suddenly it felt seductive, this foreboding opportunity to wield the fates of those I had lost. Choose again, the shadows murmured. Open the box. Reclaim your past while paving the way to a new reality. There it lay before me, shimmering in illusionary delights, beckoning and pulling at the fissures of my identity. Was this truly the path to salvation, or a descent into futility, lined with deceit? With trembling hands and a heart full of grief, I ruined the delicate balance of the air around me. I reached for the box, a decision carved from moments of longing, driven past the limits of remorse. My fingers scraped the surface, feeling the electricity surging from within as I inhaled deeply, committing to face whatever horrors lay dormant. In that moment, the world around me cracked apart, everything shattered like glass under the weight of my choice. The box sputtered open, releasing a plume of shadows that spilled forth like bile, swirling around me with vengeful delight. Every face I had lost materialized from the smoke, their anguished cries drowning out the laughter that had filled every corner of this nightmare. Their forms stretching and warping, twisting to embody decades of sorrows. When the haze cleared, I stood not before an audience of the past, but mere reflections, conduits of every pain I had surrendered. Tone infinite mirror casting nothing but infinite layers of escape that threatened to consume me once more. They wailed lovers' names, testaments of fading hope, the specters swirling around as their shadows melded into me, seeping into the very marrow of my being. As the reality warped, the walls pulsed, breathing more heavily now, and the laughter twisted into a throaty din that clawed at my sanity. I was no longer in control. "What have you done?" boomed the voice, a melding of echoes and shadows that swirled furiously, mixing torment with fury. With a final gasp, I understood. The choice I had made opened doors better left unturned. Yet amidst this veil of darkness, there was one last flicker of light, the soft echo of longing intertwined in the grief that had birthed this darkness. "Embrace it," the figure of my wife now whispered, standing before me amidst the chaos, a halo of soft, dying warmth radiating around her. "All of it. Together, we find the way." Then, as the echoes faded into the abyss, my world crumbled around me like ash in the wind, pulled by a force stronger than I, deeper than I had anticipated, a binding to each lost moment that colored my reality and carved dark trails into my soul. And in that final breath, whispering through the darkness, a razor-thin truth refocused my vision. I had been the key to this horror all along, an architect of my own despair, swirling in the chaos of every choice now revealed. The shadows were my kin, the darkness my own, and liberation an illusion waiting to break down the very barriers of my existence. What awaited me now shifted on a precipice, a raw shake of unreality, and I felt the realization thrust down to my core. The last thing I could utter, trembling on the edge of a truth I wished I had never invited, slipped through my lips. "You were never lost." I was, and the world around me exploded into darkness, laughter echoing through the void as I vanished into the haunting abyss, forever anchored in the dark, a harbinger of the horrors that lingered just beyond every unseen door.